If you think modern dating is complicated, with its half-read messages, online profiles, and invisible rules no one admits to, imagine stepping into a world where romance was a public performance. Every move dictated by strict etiquette, every conversation observed by watchful chaperones, and every gesture weighed like a chess piece in a high-stakes match. This was the Victorian era, a time when even a fleeting glance had its own set of rules, when the tilt of a gentleman's hat could mean as much as a paragraph-long message, and when accepting a gift from the wrong person could crack your reputation like fine porcelain dropped on a marble floor. Tonight, I'll take you by the hand. Figuratively, of course, since in 1855 that would already be too forward, and lead you back through the heavy oak doors of another age. An age where love moved slowly, deliberately, and where patience wasn't just a virtue, it was the only safe way to play the game. Before we begin, if you find comfort in these quiet journeys back in time, leave me a calling card in the modern sense, a like, a subscribe, and in the spirit of a Victorian tea visit, where a lady would politely inquire about your home and your health, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I never stop marveling at the thought of people, oceans, and time zones apart, drifting into sleep under the same story. Now, settle yourself. Find a comfortable spot. Perhaps not the stiff horsehair settee of a Victorian drawing room, but whatever makes you feel at ease. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders fall, and let's step together into May of 1855. You open your eyes not to the hum of traffic or the glow of your phone, but to the muted light of a London morning in Queen Victoria's reign. Outside, the air is thick with the scent of coal smoke and something sharper, the summer reek of the Thames carrying away the waste of 2.5 million souls. Somewhere in the street below, hooves strike the cobblestones in a steady rhythm, and a cartwheel creaks as it passes. And there you are, 22 years old, a respectable daughter of a small but successful haberdasher. Your family can afford good food, decent clothes, and a modest sense of security, but not the luxury of idleness. In your world, your future is not shaped by career ambition or personal whim. It hinges on one task above all: finding a suitable husband. That's where our story begins, in a world where love is a deliberate dance, where one misstep could cost everything, and one well-timed glance might alter the course of your life forever. You lie beneath heavy wool blankets, their weight pressing into you like a gentle reminder that central heating hasn't been invented yet. The stone walls around you hoard the night's chill, seeping it into your bones until even the tips of your fingers feel slow to wake. Somewhere in the house below, the clatter of kindling and the muted thud of coal in a scuttle tell you the servants have been up for hours. The door creaks open, and in slips Mary, your housemaid, her cheeks pink from the early cold, her arms straining under the weight of a brimming coal scuttle. 30 pounds of black rock, carried up and down these stairs dozens of times a day, has left her hands permanently darkened with soot, and her left shoulder slightly lower than the right. She kneels before your fireplace, arranging the kindling with quick, practiced movements. A single spark catches, then blooms into a slow orange glow, the shadows in your room retreating as the morning cold yields by inches. "Good morning, miss," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your mother says you're to dress properly today." The Weatherbees are calling this afternoon, and they're bringing their son. The name hits like a pebble dropped into still water, small but with ripples that travel far. Thomas Weatherbee, 26, newly returned from India, where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mother's hints these past weeks have been anything but subtle. This visit is not a friendly call. It is an inspection. Mary moves to your wardrobe and begins laying out the chosen armor for the day. Your best dark blue wool dress, the one with the mother of pearl buttons that took your mother 3 months to save for. "What do you know about him?" you ask, your voice still rough with sleep. She glances at the door, then leans in. "I heard from their housemaid he's got all his teeth." More than can be said for most gentlemen, and he doesn't drink overmuch. Fond of cigars, though. Been in India 4 years, so he might have some ideas. She doesn't elaborate on what sort of ideas those might be. Your eyes drift to the corset she's laid beside the dress. A cage of whalebone and cotton designed to cinch your waist into the fashionable hourglass and to make deep breathing impossible. By the time Mary has laced you in, pulling with a strength that belies her slender arms, you're forced to take careful, shallow breaths from the top of your lungs. "Not too tight, Mary," you manage, though you both know it's already as loose as the fashion allows. Layer after layer follows, the chemise, thin and cool against your skin, the bustle pad to give your skirt the fashionable bell shape. 3 petticoats adding weight and volume until you're carrying nearly 15 pounds of fabric before you've even put on your shoes. The kid leather slippers are soft but flat, meant for sitting in parlors, not walking far. Mary pins your hair into the severe middle-parted style the times demand, curling the loose strands at your temples into deliberate, face-framing softness. In the mirror, a pale, composed face gazes back at you, untouched by sun, by makeup, by anything that might hint at impropriety. You are dressed not just in clothes, but in a message. Innocence, modesty, good breeding. Outside your bedroom window, London goes about its day. The shouts of a milkman, the rhythmic sweep of a maid's broom on the front steps, the distant clip of horses trotting past. Inside, the fire grows warmer, the air more comfortable. And yet, you can feel the day's weight settling onto your shoulders long before the Weatherbees arrive. Mary is still smoothing the skirts over your lap when a familiar, deliberate knock sounds on your bedroom door. Your mother steps in, closing it firmly behind her, the movement crisp enough to signal that what follows is not idle conversation. At 45, she remains striking, her features sharp from years of vigilance over both household and reputation. Her hair swept into a severe arrangement that mirrors her own sense of order. Today she wears her second-best gown, dark brown wool with black trim, the fabric holding the faint scent of lavender water. She crosses to the bed and sits, the mattress dipping only slightly under her weight. "We need to talk before this afternoon," she begins, folding her hands in her lap. "You know why the Weatherbees are coming?" It isn't a question. You set down your teacup, strong black tea that has only just begun to cut through the corset's grip on your breath, and meet her gaze. "Thomas needs a wife," she continues evenly, "and you need a husband. It's a practical arrangement, but that does not mean it cannot be a pleasant one, provided both parties conduct themselves properly." The word properly seems to hang in the air between you, heavy as lead. She draws in a breath and begins the litany, the rules she's recited before, but today each feels newly sharpened. First, you must not accept gifts from him, not even the smallest trinket. A gentleman does not give gifts to a lady unless he is engaged to her, and accepting them too soon encourages inappropriate attentions. Her voice takes on the authority of the etiquette books she reads as if they were scripture. One gift leads to another, and before you know it, you've given him your heart without proper cause. Second, no touching. Not so much as a handshake unless your father formally introduces you, and even then it must be brief. If he offers his arm, you may take it lightly, otherwise keep your hands folded in your lap. You think of how strange this would seem to young women a century from now, when casual contact is thoughtless, almost meaningless. Here a brush of the fingers carries the weight of a promise. Third, let him lead the conversation, but don't be afraid to show intelligence. A well-educated man appreciates a woman who can speak beyond the weather, but do not contradict him directly. Find gentle ways to differ. Too much cleverness, and you'll be thought unfeminine. Too little, and you risk seeming dull. You nod, feeling the tightrope under your feet. It's a performance you've been rehearsing your entire life, a balance between being pleasing without being passive, interesting without being intimidating. Her gaze softens just enough to remind you she is not only a strategist, but your mother. And watch him closely. See how he speaks to the servants, how he treats your father, how he reacts when things go awry. Those moments will tell you more than his polished conversation ever will. Rising, she smooths an invisible crease from her skirt, her voice returning to its brisk register. "The Weatherbees will arrive at precisely 3. We'll serve tea and the small cakes cook made yesterday. You'll sit on the settee near the window. The light is most flattering there, and I'll be in the chair beside you. Your father will join us after speaking with Mr. Weatherbee about business matters. The plan is set. The rules are fixed. And as the door closes behind her, you feel both protected and confined, like a bird in a finely crafted cage. One that gleams in the sunlight, but still keeps its door firmly shut. At 10 minutes to 3, you are stationed exactly where your mother instructed, seated on the settee near the window, hands folded loosely in your lap, skirts arranged so the fabric falls in gentle waves rather than bunching awkwardly. The late afternoon light pours in, softening the lines of your face and catching the sheen of the mother-of-pearl buttons on your bodice. Your mother sits nearby with her needlework, though her eyes flick upward every few moments, watchful. Your father stands near the fireplace, consulting his pocket watch, as though the act might make time move faster. The house smells faintly of beeswax and the fresh flowers arranged that morning. Somewhere down the street, a cart rattles over uneven stones, its sound growing faint as it passes. The clock on the mantel ticks toward the appointed hour, each second stretching longer than the last. A firm knock breaks the tension. Your father disappears into the hall, his voice low but warm. You hear the rustle of coats being removed, the muted tap of walking sticks against the umbrella stand. Then footsteps approach. Mr. Weatherbee enters first, a distinguished gentleman with silver whiskers and a slight stoop, his manner suggesting a lifetime spent bent over account books. Mrs. Weatherbee follows, a rounded woman in burgundy silk, her jewelry catching the light. And then Thomas. He is taller than you expected. His brown hair parted neatly down the middle, mutton chop whiskers, framing a lean face with a warm, golden undertone, the trace of years under a harsher sun. His movements have a measured precision, as though each gesture is considered before it's made. Your father's voice carries the introduction. Mr. and Mrs. Weatherbee, may I present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Elena Hartwell. You rise smoothly, just as you've practiced, letting your skirts settle before offering a modest curtsy, deep enough to convey respect, shallow enough to remind them of your standing. Mrs. Weatherbee's smile is warm. What a pleasure to finally meet you, my dear. Thomas has been quite eager for this introduction. Thomas bows slightly. Miss Hartwell. His voice is deeper than expected, with the faintest trace of something foreign. Perhaps the lingering influence of his years abroad. You meet his eyes briefly before lowering your gaze, careful not to linger long enough to appear bold. Everyone settles into place as though they've taken positions on a stage. Thomas occupies the chair opposite you, close enough for conversation, far enough to maintain propriety. The parents begin their own carefully muted exchange, the low hum of voices serving as a polite veil for yours. I trust your journey from India was pleasant, you offer, selecting a safe and acceptable opening. Pleasant enough, Thomas replies, his tone measured. 3 months aboard ship offers ample time for reflection. I was quite ready to return to English soil. The climate there can be challenging for those unaccustomed to it. I imagine the heat must be overwhelming. We complain when our summers reach 70 degrees. Quite so. In Bombay, it was often over 100, with humidity so thick it seemed the air itself resisted being breathed. He shifts slightly, loosening his collar by an almost imperceptible degree. I confess, I developed a great appreciation for English rain. You smile, a genuine one, not the measured parlor smile you've been trained to wear. Rain is certainly something we have in abundance. The conversation continues in this delicate rhythm. He speaks of the markets in Bombay, the strange fruits he came to enjoy, the challenge of managing clerks who spoke a dozen languages. You respond with smaller stories, the books you've been reading, the music you've been practicing, small observations of London life. When Mary enters to serve tea, you notice how Thomas nods politely to her, a courtesy not every man of his class would think to offer. Later, when Mrs. Weatherbee accidentally tips her cup, sending hot liquid across the table, he is on his feet at once, producing a handkerchief without being asked. It is in that moment you catch something unexpected. The slight flinch when porcelain strikes wood, his eyes darting toward the door for the briefest instant, as if calculating escape. It is over almost before it begins, his composure restored in a blink. But you tuck the detail away, a small thread to be pulled at later. An hour passes exactly as etiquette demands. Any shorter would risk offense. Any longer would suggest presumption. As the Weatherbees prepare to leave, Thomas pauses to speak with your father in the hall, their figures visible through the doorway, but their words just beyond hearing. You watch your father nod, listen, then clasp Thomas's hand firmly. When Thomas returns, he addresses you with formality. Miss Hartwell, I would be honored to call on you again. Perhaps this Sunday, if it would be agreeable. Your heart gives a small, unbidden leap. That would be very pleasant, Mr. Weatherbee. And just like that, the first move in this delicate dance has been made. Sunday arrives with a sky the color of washed linen and the faint scent of spring in the air. You wear your second-best gown, pale green cotton patterned with tiny white flowers, a shade your mother insists makes your eyes appear brighter. There's no corset crisis this morning. The hours before Thomas's visit pass with an almost unsettling calm, broken only by the quiet hum of household routines. When the bell rings at precisely 2 o'clock, your pulse stirs, but your hands remain steady. Thomas enters with a bouquet, small, modest, and perfectly proper. Sweet peas, delicate in their purple and white blooms, their fragrance clean and fresh. Flowers, unlike jewelry or books, cannot overstep the bounds of early courtship. I noticed these growing in my mother's garden, he says, offering them with a slight bow. I thought you might enjoy them. They're lovely, you reply, burying your face in the blossoms for a moment, partly to inhale their scent, partly to conceal the warmth rising to your cheeks. Sweet peas are my favorite. I hoped they might be, he says, his tone light, but with a thread of intention running beneath it. The conversation flows more easily than it had in your first meeting. Without the stiff pressure of formal introductions, Thomas speaks more openly of his boyhood as the youngest of 4 brothers, always trying to earn a measure of attention, of his years in India, where the air could feel like a living thing pressing against the skin, of the small habits he brought back, like the morning tea brewed strong enough to stand a spoon in. You share pieces of your own life, your schooling, the hours spent at the piano, your fondness for poetry and novels. Though you are careful not to mention the more scandalous ones borrowed from your friend Catherine. You admit to a curiosity about places beyond London, though propriety keeps you from saying aloud that you've dreamed of seeing them yourself. At one point, his expression shifts, a flicker of vulnerability. I find London overwhelming after so long away. The noise, the press of people. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to be properly English. Perhaps it's not about being properly anything, you suggest softly. 4 years is a long time. You've seen and done things most of us never will. That changes a person. He studies you as though he hadn't expected such an answer. You're very perceptive, Miss Hartwell. So begins the rhythm of your Sundays. Each week, at precisely 2 o'clock, Thomas arrives. Sometimes you remain in the parlor, your mother nearby with her embroidery. Other times, you walk together in the small back garden, your steps always within sight of Aunt Caroline's ever-watchful gaze. The rules of courtship hold fast. No unchaperoned moments, no gifts beyond flowers, no touch beyond the occasional offered arm. And yet, within those constraints, something unmistakable is forming. You learn his laugh, genuine, low, and unforced, and the way he listens without rushing to fill a silence. He learns the cadence of your voice when you're amused, the rare way your eyes brighten when a subject interests you. The weeks blur into a sequence of small, deliberate steps forward, each one modest, but together tracing a path towards something neither of you is quite ready to name. It is on the 4th Sunday of these measured visits that Thomas makes a request unlike any before. The afternoon light slants through the parlor window, warming the folds of your skirt. When he glances toward your mother, seated nearby with her needlework, then back to you. Miss Hartwell, he begins with a careful formality. I wonder if you might consent to accompany me to the exhibition at the Crystal Palace next Saturday. With proper chaperonage, of course. The words settle between you like a stone dropped into still water, ripples of possibilities spreading outward. A public outing, together. Your mother's needle pauses mid-stitch, though her face remains composed. This is no small invitation. Attending a public event together is a step toward declaring yourselves keeping company in the eyes of society. I would be delighted, Mr. Weatherbee, you say, keeping your voice steady, though you feel a flicker of excitement deep in your chest. Saturday arrives bright and clear, as if the day itself has been polished. You wear your best deep blue silk dress, the one your mother saved 6 months to afford, with its matching jacket and modest hat trimmed with ribbons. Your gloves are pristine white kid leather. Your beaded reticule, carrying a handkerchief, smelling salts, and a few coins. The small arsenal of a respectable lady. Thomas arrives in an open landau carriage. Aunt Caroline already seated opposite the space he has left for you. Her most formidable hat, the one with feathers that seem to point accusingly, perches atop her head, like a warning to any who might consider impropriety. The streets are alive with movement. Carriages jostle for position with omnibuses. Vendors cry their wares. Fresh flowers, penny a bunch, hot pies, chimney sweeps with soot-blackened faces dart between carts. Thomas points out landmarks as you pass, the Gothic towers of the new Houses of Parliament, the blackened stone of Westminster Abbey, the bridges spanning the Thames where barges wait in the murky water. Crossing south of the river, the air changes. The scent of industry heavier here, laced with the less pleasant odors of overcrowded neighborhoods. And then climbing Sydenham Hill, it appears. The Crystal Palace. It rises before you like a dream made solid. Iron and glass catching the sunlight in 1,000 glimmers. Its vast form both delicate and immense. Around it gardens stretch in formal symmetry. Exotic plants and bright flower beds, arranged into intricate patterns, best admired from the palace's elevated terraces. It's magnificent, you breathe before you can stop yourself. Indeed, Thomas says, offering his arm as you alight from the carriage. It reminds me, in its ambition, if not its architecture, of some of the palaces I saw in India. The same confidence in human ingenuity. Inside, the scale overwhelms at first. The central nave stretches away under a glass roof that seems impossibly high. Sunlight spilling through to illuminate fountains, tropical trees, and displays from every corner of the empire. Industrial machinery gleams beside delicate collections of butterflies. A case of rare minerals catches light in sharp blue and green flashes. Artistic installations blend science and beauty in ways you've never seen. The crowd is thick, but Thomas navigates it with care, easing you toward quieter alcoves when the press becomes too much, pausing patiently while you linger at exhibits. Aunt Caroline's eyes never stray far, but her sharp posture softens once she's settled with tea and a scone in the refreshment room. It is there, in the brief shelter of her distraction, that Thomas leans slightly closer, his voice pitched for you alone. I hope you won't think me presumptuous, but I find myself growing quite attached to these excursions and to your company. Your heart catches. He is close, not yet declaring himself, but drawing near the threshold. I have enjoyed them as well, you reply, your words quieter than you intend. I had hoped. He stops himself, glances toward your aunt, then returns to safer ground. Perhaps this is not the proper venue for such discussions. You meet his gaze just long enough for him to understand. You're not discouraging him, merely agreeing to the rules that have brought you this far. And between you, unspoken, the thought forms. Soon. The rest of the afternoon passes in a haze of color, sound, and movement. Exotic birds, flashing impossible feathers, demonstrations of photographic techniques that capture a face in minutes rather than hours, the taste of fruits whose names you can barely pronounce. Yet under it all runs a steady, unbroken current, the sense that something is drawing nearer, inevitable, and entirely welcome. It is 3 evenings after the Crystal Palace excursion when the knock comes, later than any polite social call would usually permit. The lamps in the sitting room are already dimmed. Your father has retreated to his study with the Times, and your mother is mending a glove by the glow of the fire. The knock is firm, deliberate, not the hurried rap of a messenger, nor the hesitant tap of a stranger. Your father rises, his brow lifting slightly at the hour, and steps into the hall. You hear the murmur of voices, low, measured, and then the door closes with a solid thud. Moments later, your father reappears. "Miss Hartwell," he says in a tone that makes you sit straighter. "Mr. Weatherbee has called to speak with me on a private matter." Your mother's eyes flick to yours, a silent question, but you have no answer. You sit in the soft half-light, your hands curled around the teacup in your lap, as the 2 men retreat to the study. The heavy door clicks shut behind them. What passes in that room is beyond your hearing, but your mind paints it in vivid strokes. Tom is standing straight-backed before your father's desk, his voice steady as he speaks of intentions, of futures, of honor. Your father's measured replies, weighing character against means, sincerity against the unspoken politics of family standing. 15 minutes stretch into 20. The clock on the mantel ticks with maddening precision. Your mother continues sewing, but the needle's rhythm is uneven. Neither of you speak. At last, the study door opens. Thomas emerges, his expression composed, but his eyes brighter than you have seen them. He bows slightly to your mother. "Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for receiving me at such an hour." Then he turns to you. For a heartbeat, the formality in his posture softens, his voice carrying a warmth that is almost personal. "Miss Hartwell, I hope to see you again very soon." The words are polite enough for a public parlor, but the way he says them leaves no doubt a step has been taken. Something irrevocable has been set in motion. When the door closes behind him, your father returns to his chair by the fire. He picks up his paper, then sets it down again without reading a line. "Thomas Weatherbee," he says slowly, "has asked my permission to make you an offer of marriage." The words land like a bell's toll in your chest. Deep, resonant, impossible to ignore. Your mother's face is unreadable, though you catch the faintest tightening at the corners of her mouth. A mixture, perhaps, of pride and relief. She smooths the glove in her lap and says simply, "Well, we shall see how he proceeds." And you, though your hands are steady, though your voice remains calm, feel the room tilt slightly, as if the next chapter of your life has already begun to turn its first page. It is the following Sunday when Thomas arrives, not at the usual hour, but earlier, just past noon. The unannounced change in timing sends a tremor of awareness through the household. The table in the front hall is still cluttered with the post. Aunt Caroline's hat lies abandoned on the settee, and you have only just finished fastening the final pearl button on your bodice when Mary appears at your door. "Mr. Weatherbee is here, miss," she says, her tone betraying the tiniest spark of excitement. "Your father's with him in the drawing room." You descend the stairs slowly, your gloved hand grazing the polished wood of the banister. The drawing room door is ajar, and through it you glimpse Thomas standing near the mantel, hands clasped behind his back. His posture is formal, but the faint rise and fall of his shoulders suggests a heart pacing ahead of his words. Your father stands beside his chair, one hand resting on its carved back. "Miss Hartwell," he says, gesturing you forward. "Mr. Weatherbee has something he wishes to say to you." You step fully into the room. Thomas turns, and in the soft daylight streaming through the lace curtains, his expression is steady, his gaze direct. "Miss Hartwell," he begins, his voice carrying the careful weight of a man who has rehearsed these words. "In the months since our acquaintance began, I have found your conversation a continual pleasure. Your manner both gracious and sincere. I believe we could make a life together, one founded on mutual respect, companionship, and I hope affection." The words are formal, but beneath them there is something warmer, almost fragile, a quiet sincerity that makes the air feel heavier around you. "I am in a position to provide for you comfortably," he continues, "and I would be honored if you would consent to be my wife." Time stretches. You are aware of your mother's presence just beyond the door, of the faint crackle of the fire in the grate, of your own breath, shallow in the confines of your corset. You recall the rules your mother drilled into you. Never appear too eager. Let the man see you have considered his offer with due gravity. And so, you let the silence linger just long enough to honor the ritual. "I would be pleased to accept, Mr. Weatherbee," you say at last, your voice low but clear. Something in his shoulders loosens, though his composure holds. He bows, taking your hand, gloved still, and presses his lips lightly to the back of it. The brief contact sends a pulse of warmth through you, startling in its quiet intensity. Your father steps forward to clasp his hand, sealing the agreement. Then it is settled. We will speak of arrangements. Outside, a passing carriage rattles over the cobblestones, the driver's call to his horses fading into the distance. Inside, the moment holds, a small, perfect hinge on which your life has just turned. The morning after the proposal dawns pale and clear, but the air in the Hartwell household feels charged, as though the walls themselves have learned a secret they're eager to whisper. On the dining table lies a neat stack of cream-colored note cards, your mother's preferred stationery, alongside the silver inkstand reserved for significant correspondence. Your father sits at the head of the table, already drafting letters in his precise hand. He pauses between lines, weighing each phrase like a jeweler examining a stone, determined that no word might be misread or misinterpreted. We'll begin with the Weatherbee's closest relations, then our own extended family, he says, without looking up. Announcements to acquaintances can follow once those most deserving of direct notice have been informed. Your mother is equally methodical. She supervises the sealing of envelopes with the family crest in deep red wax, the faint scent of beeswax curling into the air. Between instructions to Mary about the day's errands, she murmurs small reminders to you. You'll need to write to Catherine yourself. She'll never forgive hearing it from anyone else. And remember, the tone must be modest. No gushing. By afternoon, the first wave of reactions begins. A knock at the door brings Mrs. Graham, your mother's oldest friend, cheeks flushed from the cold, and eyes bright with curiosity. She insists she was just passing by, but wastes no time settling into the parlor, drawing the news from your mother as though it were a particularly sweet piece of toffee. Well, my dear, I must say, I am not surprised, she tells you, patting your hand with an air of smug satisfaction. One can tell these things from the very first meeting. He has a solid bearing, none of your foppish airs. She leans in slightly. And between us, I suspect he'll age well. A good jawline. By evening, a stream of callers has passed through the house. Some genuinely pleased, others politely so, their smiles tight around the edges. There are the inevitable murmurs about Thomas's years in India. Such heat, I cannot imagine, about the Weatherbees standing in certain business circles, about whether his return to England signals a shift in fortune or ambition. In quieter moments, you read the letters that arrive in reply to the first batch of announcements. Catherine's is as warm as you expected, filled with underlined words and tiny exclamation marks that feel like the closest thing to an embrace from afar. An aunt you scarcely remember writes a stiff but approving note about the importance of alliances between respectable families. Through it all, Thomas remains a steady presence. He calls again that week, bringing with him Not flowers this time, but a small book of poems, perfectly proper, with his inscription limited to your name and the date. Still, when you hold it, the fine texture of the paper and the faint trace of his cologne on the cover make it feel far more intimate than any bouquet. And so, the news settles into the fabric of your days, altering the way people look at you in the street, the way shopkeepers greet you, the way conversations shift when you enter a room. You're no longer merely Miss Hartwell, the haberdasher's daughter. You are the future Mrs. Thomas Weatherbee, and every glance carries the weight of that expectation. Within a week of the engagement becoming common knowledge, the business of wedding planning begins in earnest. Not as a flurry of joyful creativity, but as a steady march of decisions, negotiations, and unspoken calculations. Your mother takes command of the process with the precision of a general mapping a campaign. The ceremony will be at St. Martin's, of course. Anything less would be seen as a step down for the family's standing. Invitations must be engraved, not printed. The menu for the wedding breakfast will require both restraint and elegance. No ostentatious French excess, but certainly not the plain fare of an ordinary Sunday. I want them to see that we can match the Weatherbees in refinement, your mother says one evening, leaning over the dining table, strewn with fabric swatches and invitation samples. Not that we must, only that we can. Your father, meanwhile, concerns himself with the more practical matters, the marriage settlement, the timing of the banns, the question of where you and Thomas will live. He and Mr. Weatherbee exchanged letters and arranged discreet meetings in the back room of your father's shop. Their tones cordial, but edged with the quiet firmness of men ensuring their interests are secured. Thomas visits twice a week now, once on Sunday, as before, and once midweek. The nature of these meetings has shifted subtly. Before, your conversations were light, exploratory, filled with the careful curiosity of two people discovering one another. Now there is a growing undercurrent of logistics. He tells you of the house he has in mind in Kensington, a narrow but well-kept terrace with a small walled garden. He asks your opinion on the furniture, the color of the drawing room drapes, whether you would prefer a piano in the front parlor or the smaller sitting room upstairs. I want it to feel like your home as much as mine, he says, and you believe him. Yet you also sense that, in some quiet way, the rhythm of your courtship is giving way to the structure of a partnership that is already being built, brick by brick, decision by decision. There are moments of softness still. One rainy Wednesday, he arrives early, bringing with him a parcel wrapped in brown papers, a copy of Jane Eyre, newly bound in dark green cloth. For those quiet afternoons, he says, when I am away on business. The gift feels almost like a promise, though you both know such open sentiment would be too bold to speak aloud. And yet, alongside this tenderness runs a faint, restless energy. The closer the wedding draws, the more you feel the quiet hum of change, not unwelcome, but undeniable. The conversations are shifting from who you are to what you will become together. By the time the first proofs of the invitations arrive, neatly stacked on the parlor table, you understand that the weeks ahead will belong less to romance and more to the machinery of marriage. And that somewhere in that machinery, you and Thomas must find a way to keep hold of the thread that first drew you toward each other. The morning of your wedding dawns pale and cool, a thin mist clinging to the rooftops, as if the city itself is holding its breath. From your bedroom window, the street below looks softened at the edges, the familiar outlines of shop fronts and chimneys blurred in the damp light. Somewhere, far off, a church bell tolls the hour, each note slow, deliberate, like footsteps approaching. The house has been awake since before sunrise. Downstairs, Mary and the cook clatter about the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread and coffee mingling with the faint, sharp tang of beeswax from the furniture polish. Your mother moves briskly from room to room, her voice a low stream of instructions. Even your father, usually unhurried in the mornings, is dressed and out early, attending to some last-minute detail at the church. Your own chamber is a world apart, quieter, though not calm. The air is thick with the scent of lavender water, spilled from a bottle onto the dressing table. Your wedding gown hangs in the wardrobe, its ivory silk glowing faintly in the dim light, the lace veil folded neatly beside it. On the bed, the long white gloves lie waiting, fingers limp and delicate, as if already holding their place in the day's events. Aunt Caroline arrives just after 8, her hat crowned with a small fortress of black feathers. She inspects the gown with a critical eye, nods once and declares it suitable. Then she settles into the armchair by the window and begins her silent vigil, hands folded over the handle of her parasol. When your maid begins arranging your hair, you find yourself watching the mirror with an odd detachment, as though the reflection belongs to someone else entirely, a young woman who looks composed, serene, almost untouched by the currents swirling around her. Yet beneath the surface, your pulse beats fast enough to betray you. You think of Thomas, perhaps already at the church by now, speaking with the vicar, greeting his best man. You wonder if he is nervous, if he has rehearsed the words he will speak before God and family. You wonder, too, how it will feel when you hear them directed to you. By mid-morning, the house hums with a barely contained energy. Guests are beginning to arrive at the church. The carriage is being readied at the door. Your mother sweeps in to give final instructions to the maid, to Aunt Caroline, to you. Her voice is firm, but when she adjusts the fall of your veil, her hands linger a fraction longer than needed. There now, she says quietly, almost to herself. You'll do? The clock strikes 10. In less than an hour, you will step into the aisle, the air filled with music, the eyes of the congregation upon you. For now, though, you sit in the stillness before it all begins, listening to the faint creak of the house settling. the muffled sounds of the city beyond the mist, and the steady, unstoppable beat of your own heart. The carriage ride to the church is a short one, yet it seems to stretch endlessly. Each turn of the wheels bringing you closer to a moment that will divide your life into before and after. The glass panes are misted at the edges, framing the passing streets like faded photographs. Pedestrians pause to watch as you pass, some smiling, others simply curious. Strangers who will never know your name, yet will remember the sight of a bride in ivory silk. When the church finally comes into view, its stone facade rises from the fog with quiet authority. The tall arched windows glinting faintly in the muted light. Outside, the air carries the mingled scents of damp stone, beeswax polish, and early spring blossoms from the nearby churchyard. Your father helps you down from the carriage. His hand is warm and steady, though his grip tightens just slightly, as if to anchor you in the moment. Ahead, the great wooden doors stand open, spilling a golden glow from within. Inside, the air is cool and still, the hush broken only by the soft rustle of clothing and the faint echo of footsteps along the flagstone floor. Guests fill the pews in orderly rows, a sea of familiar and half-familiar faces turn toward the back of the church. At the far end of the aisle, Thomas waits, his posture upright, his gaze fixed on you with a quiet intensity that makes the distance between you feel both vast and already bridged. The organ begins, low and resonant, the opening chords blooming into the space until it feels as though the very walls are leaning in to listen. You take the first step forward, your arm linked with your father's, the long train of your gown whispering over the aisle runner. Time seems to slow, the flicker of candlelight, the murmur of silk as you pass, the faint scent of lilies from the altar arrangements. When you reach the chancel, your father releases your hand into Thomas's. His touch is firm, not lingering, yet in that moment, you feel the full weight of the exchange. The silent passing of trust, of responsibility, of your place in one household to another. The vicar's voice is clear, his words flowing in a rhythm older than memory. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here. The phrases are ones you have heard at other weddings, yet now each one seems sharpened, as though it has been waiting for this day, for you. When it is your turn to speak, your voice comes steady, the syllables deliberate. I will. Thomas's reply follows, low and sure, carrying through the space without strain. Rings are exchanged, cool metal warming quickly against the skin, and the final blessing is given. You may kiss the bride. The moment is brief, chaste, yet in the quiet brush of lips lies the promise of 1,000 unspoken things. Comfort, partnership, the slow weaving together of two lives. The organ swells again as you turn together to face the aisle, Light spills through the high windows, catching in the veil, in the glint of your new ring, in the subtle smile Thomas allows himself as you begin the walk toward the open doors and the bright, waiting world beyond. The church doors open to the sound of carriage wheels and the scattering cheer of well-wishers. Rice patters softly against your skirts, the grains catching in the lace as you and Thomas step into the daylight. A few children dart forward with flowers, their mothers calling them back with indulgent smiles. The air is still cool, but the sky has cleared. A pale, promising blue overhead. The ride to the Weatherbee home passes in a pleasant blur. Thomas sits beside you, offering small, reassuring remarks about familiar streets and landmarks, though his hand rests just close enough to yours on the seat to feel like an unspoken tether. When you arrive, the house is already alive with the sound of voices, the clink of glassware, the faint strains of a piano from the front parlor. The breakfast table stretches the length of the dining room, its white cloth gleaming under the light of the chandelier. Arrangements of white roses and pale green ferns stand at measured intervals, their fragrance mingling with the rich aroma of roasted meats, warm rolls, and strong coffee. Guests gather in small knots, the conversation flowing easily on the surface, though you can feel the subtle currents beneath. A cousin of Thomas's leans in to remark on the impressive attendance for a match made so swiftly. One of your father's acquaintances compliments the lace on your gown, but lets her gaze linger a little too long on the modest size of your bouquet, as if reading it for hidden meaning. Thomas moves through the room with steady composure, introducing you to those whose names blur in your memory almost as soon as you hear them. He keeps a measured pace, never letting you linger too long with any one group, steering you gently toward allies, the friends who speak warmly, the aunts who press your hand in genuine welcome. The meal itself is served in orderly courses, delicate soup, poached fish in a light cream, roast fowl with spring vegetables, syllabub in crystal dishes. Glasses are raised in a scattering of toasts, some brief and heartfelt, others winding into long anecdotes that earn polite laughter. Your father rises near the end, his words simple and direct. A blessing for your union, a nod to the families gathered, a quiet assurance of his respect for Thomas. The applause that follows is warm, and for the first time all morning, you feel the last trace of tension in your shoulders ease. Afterward, as guests drift toward the garden for air and conversation, you find a moment's stillness by one of the tall windows. Outside, the early spring sunlight glints on the wet flagstones, and the air smells faintly of lilac from a bush just beginning to bloom. Thomas joins you there, his voice pitched low, so only you can hear. "How are you faring?" he asks. "Well enough," you reply, smiling faintly. "Though I think I shall remember only half the names I've been told." "That is twice as many as I managed," he says, and the quiet humor in his tone is enough to make you breathe a little deeper, a little easier. Soon the coach will come to take you away from the scrutiny of relatives, away from the shifting undercurrents of polite society, and into the uncertain but shared territory of married life. The hour for departure arrives almost without warning, signaled not by the clock, but by a subtle shift in the room's energy. Guests begin glancing toward the windows, murmuring about the weather for travel. The servants appear with shawls and valises. Someone, perhaps your mother, presses a small parcel into your hands, whispering something you don't quite catch in the soft tide of goodbyes. The carriage stands ready outside, its polished black panels reflecting the pale afternoon light. The horses stamp against the cobblestones, their breath clouding in the cool air. A footman waits with the door open, gloved hand poised to assist you. You move through the gathering with practiced grace, handshakes, polite kisses on the cheek, the warm clasp of your father's hand. His eyes linger on you for a moment, longer than custom demands, a silent benediction. Your mother's embrace is firmer than expected. Her perfume, lavender, and a faint trace of starch, imprinting itself in your memory. Thomas takes your arm, guiding you toward the waiting carriage. The murmur of voices swells behind you, but you do not turn back. There is a curious stillness in the moment your foot finds the carriage step, as though the air itself has thickened between one world and the next. Once inside, the door closes with a solid thump, muting the crowd outside to a distant hum. Thomas settles beside you, the warmth of his presence filling the enclosed space. For a while, you ride in companionable silence, the rhythmic sway of the carriage and the steady clop of hooves, a kind of heartbeat carrying you forward. London's streets pass in shifting scenes, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, a boy chasing after a runaway hat, the glint of sunlight on the dome of St. Paul's as the city slowly thins into quieter lanes. An hour into the journey, Thomas leans slightly toward you. "We'll be there soon," he says, his tone neither hurried nor hesitant, but certain, as if he's been traveling toward this moment far longer than the road itself. When the carriage finally turns onto a narrow street, lined with tidy terrace houses, you see the place that will be your first shared home. Its pale brick front is softened by a small walled garden, where a single rose bush bends under the weight of unopened buds. The horses slow to a halt. Thomas steps out first, offering his hand. You take it, the air brisk on your skin. The garden gate creaking faintly as it swings open. The house key glints in his other hand, small, ordinary, yet carrying the weight of everything that lies ahead. As you cross the threshold together, the door closes behind you, sealing out the city noise, the crowd, and the life you've just left. Ahead is only the faint scent of fresh paint, the muted echo of your footsteps, and the quiet beginning of your marriage. The house greets you with a soft emptiness. No voices, no clatter of servants yet, only the faint echo of the door shutting behind you. Afternoon light slants through the front windows, painting pale gold across the polished floorboards. Your belongings have already been placed in the front hall. The trunk with its worn leather straps, the hat box you packed so carefully, the smaller parcels from your mother. Thomas sets his hat aside, then pauses to look around as if seeing the rooms for the first time himself. He leads you through the ground floor, the narrow dining room with its walnut table, the front parlor with a small marble mantel, the faint scent of coal still clinging to the grate. In the kitchen, the fire is laid but unlit, the shelves neatly lined with china waiting to be used. Upstairs, the bedchamber feels both unfamiliar and already yours. The bed is dressed in crisp linen, the curtains drawn halfway against the fading light. On the dressing table, someone, perhaps the housekeeper, has left a small vase of primroses. Their pale, yellow faces seem to turn toward you in quiet welcome. By the time the first fire is lit in the parlor, the day outside has cooled into evening. You share a simple supper. Bread still warm from the oven, slices of cold roast, a modest bottle of claret opened for the occasion. Conversation drifts between the practical and the personal, where the tea things should be kept, how you might use the little walled garden, whether the front parlor or the smaller sitting room upstairs would make the better place for the piano. Later, you stand at the front window, watching the gas lamps flicker to life along the street. The neighborhood is hushed now, the day's business giving way to the gentle rhythm of evening. A child's laughter from somewhere down the road, the distant clip of hooves on stone, the faint creak of your own house settling into its frame. Thomas joins you at the window. For a moment, neither of you speaks. Then softly, he says, "It feels different, doesn't it? The world outside, and the one in here." You nod. The truth of it settles between you like a warm shawl, the awareness that everything beyond this threshold will always be out there, while here, in this quiet space, is where the two of you will shape a life. When you finally retire upstairs, the house seems to exhale, the fire's glow fading to embers. Lying in the stillness, you can hear the faint hum of the city beyond the walls. But it is softened now, blurred at the edges, as though the world has taken one step back to give you room. And in that gentle space, you close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow will bring the beginning of countless ordinary days. And that within those days, the shape of your marriage will be slowly, quietly carved.